Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Olivier Menel. I am the Events Officer at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on maximizing your use of Office 365. This will be presented by Matt Walton, who is Senior IT Consultant at InfoExchange. Before we start, I would like to remind you that this session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you all shortly. You will be able to access that recording and the slides at any time on our website. If you have any question during the webinar, please type it in the question box on your webinar panel and we'll go through them midway through and at the end of the webinar. We have a large number of attendees today, so we may not be able to answer all your questions, but if that's the case, we'll answer them via email later on. If you have any technical issue, please also type it in a question box and I will do my best to help you with it. And I think we're all ready to go, so I'll hand over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Ollie, and welcome everyone to today's webinar on maximising your use of Office 365. So this session's really designed for organisations who are either already using Office 365 or about to use Office 365 and really just trying to shed a light on all the things that Office 365 can do, or at least as much as we can cover in an hour today. So what we're finding is a lot of people are using it for one or two features, maybe just for emails or for particular functions. Actually realise the breadth of applications and functions that Office 365 can do. So this is the purpose of today's session, and hopefully you leave today with a bit of broader understanding about how Office 365 could work for your organisation and some things to think about if you're planning on implementing. So I work at InfoExchange, so we also are a not-for-profit, and we only work with not-for-profits. So our experience is working with a broad range of organisations and working with a broad range of solutions across Office 365. So even just the ones on that page, they're ranging from small volunteer-led organisations with only a couple of staff to large nationwide organisations with thousands of staff. So each of them will use Office 365 differently, and that's okay. The whole point of the platform is it is flexible and it's scalable to suit different organisations' needs. So as I mentioned today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's new in Office 365. So I have updated this since the last time I ran this webinar a few months ago, because Office 365 is changing every day. And new features are available now than they were 3 months ago. So I'll talk about that. I'll talk about how to assess your requirements and which applications can help you meet those requirements. And then some of the common platforms and applications that we help organisations implement and see a lot of value in are things like SharePoint, Yammer and Skype for Business, which I'll go into a little bit more detail on. And then I'll talk about accessibility from mobile devices and authentication. And as Ollie said, I will pause for questions at the end, but also probably about halfway through. So we'll try and answer as many as we can, but if your question's very individual and customised specifically for your organisation, happy to have the discussion offline via email afterwards. So my email's on the slides. So feel free to contact me directly. So really, when we're talking about Office 365, it's great to get hung up in the technology and the cool features and toys, but really you always need to bring it back to what are the benefits to our organisation and why are we doing this? So really the key benefits as described in this research that was of people who had implemented Office 365 is around just taking care of a lot of that technology that you used to have to do with servers and data centers and those sort of things. Nowadays you just let Microsoft look after all of that for you. So it really does save on a lot of headaches. One of the key reasons most people come to us and ask to move to Office 365 is mobility. So whether it's that you're working under an NDIS environment in the disability sector and all your support staff now need access to information, then perhaps they all need mobile devices now. So there's a lot of scenarios where people are wanting to work from home or work from client sites or have that flexible work arrangement where you can access emails and documents and systems. So mobility is something that Office 365 does well. But also people are really interested and concerned about control and compliance. So making sure that an organisation like Microsoft do all the right things to protect your data and making sure that you're respecting privacy of your clients and also making sure that the information that you store on Office 365 is protected. More and more in a highly competitive environment, people are more looking to things like business intelligence and actually being able to analyse your data, not just collecting and storing information about your clients or processes, but actually being able to analyse that and display that in a dashboard or to your management team and your board in a way that helps you improve the outcomes that you deliver for clients. And lastly, but definitely not least, is the collaboration across your organisation. So it's taking the concepts of Facebook and social media and working together and then applying that into a business or organisational environment so that your teams can work together and collaborate. So those 5 are just a few of the key areas that we're seeing Office 365 really bring some benefits to not-for-profit organisations, but there are many more. So getting down to an overview of what is Office 365, a lot of people are confused. Microsoft do name things in a funny way. You can buy Office 365 in Officeworks nowadays, but essentially that's a totally different product from what we're talking about today. That's essentially a copy of Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, those sort of things, and that's really all you get. But what you're getting with the Office 365 that I'm referring to is an enterprise platform that Microsoft are now offering for free for eligible not-for-profits. So it's an E1 license, which is an enterprise license. So this is essentially the same product that BHP and NAB and Queensland Government and all these large organisations are paying a lot of money for, upwards of $20 per user per month, and you're actually getting it for free. So it's important to get your head across the enterprise version and the differences that makes. So really each of those boxes is a function and feature that is available to you. Now again, you don't need to use all of them, but you can use as many of them as you want. So mail, calendars, and people, and tasks. So that's what you used to have on an Exchange server in your office typically. So that's what's called Exchange Online. So again, you get basically an email platform with calendars and contacts for free. You also get Yammer for collaboration. OneDrive and SharePoint, where it says sites, is for document management, and some people use SharePoint for intranets and forms and processes as well. And then there are obviously the Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote products, which many of you would have traditionally bought as a desktop product. So you go to Officeworks and buy it for $200, or if you're smart, which you should be, go to Connecting Up and get the downloaded version of Office 2016 Pro Plus for $56, and that gets you your desktop copy. Now most people will still continue to have a desktop copy on your laptop or desktop, but you also get a copy, Word Online, Excel Online, PowerPoint Online, means you can access that from any device. So for people who don't have a laptop, maybe they're your volunteers or your board members or casual staff, they can now edit your Word documents and access Excel regardless of what they've got on their computer at home. So it does give you some flexibility to be able to operate just through a web browser. Now, it's not quite as good as the Word local copy, but most people can manage on a short-term basis or for casual staff using just the online products. Now, there are some optional extras in here as well. So CRM and Power BI are things that you can actually, secondary systems that you can get an additional license for. So I won't talk too much about them today, but you can definitely add on other products within the Microsoft suite. So the other thing to remember is Microsoft are continuously rolling out additional products and features and functions as part of this Office 365 package. Now, most of them are free and are included in your E1. Some of them are add-on products, like as I said with Power BI, and there are some other tools that I'll mention later today that are sort of secondary applications that you can buy additional licenses for. But this roadmap is online, so just Google Office 365 roadmap and you will be able to see what's coming out next and what's already available. So you can, if there's a particular thing you're interested in or that piques your interest today and that I haven't given you enough information on, I would go here to review Microsoft's public roadmap of what they're rolling out. So these are some of the new things that are either about to roll out or in the process of rolling out. So most of these, to be honest, are in preview mode, so I'm using a lot of them, but a lot of these I wouldn't necessarily recommend you automatically roll out for your whole organisation without testing. So there are some caveats around some of these in terms of they're still early days, but they are exciting and they are things that are worth considering. So, did you know that Skype for Business now, just recently actually, in the last few weeks, have released an E5 license, which basically means that you can have a dial-in number to your video conferences. So when I create a Skype for Business meeting and I share that either internally or externally, it automatically has a phone number embedded in the email so that people dialing into the meeting that don't have a computer or don't have access to Skype for Business can just dial in over the phone. So that is a really good feature, and a lot of people are actually paying a fair bit for third-party webinar tools that this could potentially replace. There is also down the track sort of semi-released Cloud PABX, which means you can use Skype for Business as your phone system. So again, that's on the radar and in process of being rolled out. The other thing that many people don't know about is mobile device management. So if you're starting to have a lot of your staff have documents or emails or critical organizational information on their smartphones, then you can actually, there's a free tool within Office 365 that can help you manage that and do things like remote wipe or push and pull information from these phones. So if a person leaves your organization, you can disconnect their access on their phone or essentially wipe some of the Office 365 data off the phone. So that, for some organisations, is an important risk management tool, which is now available free. Office 365 Planner is another one that it's just in the process of being rolled out. It's basically a project management tool similar to Trello, which is one that's out there on the market that you would be paying money for. So it's another really nice tool. Planner is also part of what's called Office 365 Groups. Now, Groups is really exciting. It's part of It's a collaboration tool that embeds a planner, a document, library, a notebook, a calendar, and an email distribution list for particular groups. So I have some boards using Office 365 groups, project teams, or areas within organisations. So it's a user-led thing where people can set up a group, use for collaboration and discussion, as well as work on documents and projects together. So that's an exciting tool as well that will soon be integrated throughout all of Office 365. There's a new SharePoint Sync client. Now it's in preview, so I don't typically recommend you just automatically roll this out yet, but we have had some clients who have had some issues with the OneDrive sync when they're syncing sort of lots of documents or documents with long file names. So there's a new client that you would install that can help reduce some of those issues. The other key things that Microsoft are working on is Flow. It's a workflow tool within SharePoint, as well as Power Apps, which is basically, it allows you to develop an app which is a form that allows you to input information from a mobile device into a SharePoint list. So that's a really cool feature as well. Again, still early days for those tools, and they're still working on that functionality. And Delve Analytics is another one. So if you haven't looked at Delve yet, go and look in your menu. Look at Delve is essentially a great way to search across your organization and across your content. But Delve Analytics is actually getting, it's using computer learning to really review how you work within Office 365. So it tracks how often you're in meetings, how long it takes you to respond to emails, all of those things that can help with your productivity. So I would just, again, keep an eye out on those. Make sure you're doing your due diligence and testing before you roll those out, or speak to someone who's been using them. So, but some really exciting new features coming out from Microsoft. So with all these new features, it is very tempting to just go off and download them or install them and roll them out to users and start playing with these new toys. But what we actually find is often they're not actually needed, or you've got some other process that's, you've got a client management system instead, or so really it's about making sure that you need it and who's going to use it and why. So before you roll out any of those new things, or even anything like SharePoint or any application within Office 365, or to be honest, any IT system, I would first look at these. So who's using it and what is the key reason for accessing it and what are they on? Because the answer to some of these questions may actually dictate which application you use and which you don't use. And if you roll something out and you don't consider these, be prepared for some issues with adoption, or actually people using it in the wrong way, or getting some bad feedback, because it's really about making sure that that tool is relevant and suitable to your organization and to your staff. And the last point around what does success look like, have something measurable that you can track. We have often organizations who turn things on and then a year later go, oh yeah, I don't know how that went. No idea if that was a success or not. So it's working out, okay, do you want 100% adoption for all staff? Is it an optional that it'd be great if one or two teams start using it? So it's really about looking at why are they using it and who's going to be using it. And once you have that, then you can determine which application is most suitable to you. So here's some examples. So if you're looking at having some collaboration, you're in a small team and you also want to collaborate on some documents, then something like Office 365 groups could be pretty easy and suitable to implement. Whereas if you've got a larger organization and you're really just focusing on discussion, then probably Yammer's a better tool. Whereas if you're, again, a large organization and you want more an intranet style platform with document collaboration, maybe for your boards and your staff, then a SharePoint intranet is probably suitable for you. Business intelligence, you would look at Power BI to really create those dashboards and that reporting for, again, your management, your staff. Obviously Skype for Business is suitable for instant messaging, video conferencing, and point of presence, so you can see where everyone is across the organisation. But individuals, if you've just got an individual, a small team, and really they just want to store their own documents with some basic sharing, then you probably don't need SharePoint, to be honest. You probably just get away with OneDrive for Business because each user gets a terabyte of storage. Whereas lists, forms and databases, you can actually start doing some of those things on SharePoint, some of those basic functions. If you're using emails, again, OWA mobile app. Project management can be done in SharePoint as well, or Office 365 Planner or Groups. So I hope you get the sense that there are particular applications that are suitable for specific purposes. So don't assume that everything's going to be suitable for you, but sort of work through that process and make sure it's relevant and that you have a plan before you implement. Now, one of the most common things that we see across organisations is actually a poor adoption. And usually the poor adoption is because you've implemented something that your staff don't need or want. But if it is something that they need, but you just don't know, you need to convey that to them, these are some of the ways that we help organisations do that. So again, it's just picking the things that add value to your organisation and explaining the benefits and reasoning to staff. So it's no point just saying, yep, we're using SharePoint, here you go. It's more about, hey, this will add value and save you time and allow you to collaborate with your teams and store things, have a single source of information so you're not replicating. It's solving one of the problems that they would have on a day-to-day basis. We've seen the best success with some of these intranet and SharePoint projects is actually naming it and branding it and making a bit of fuss about it and having a bit of a rollout, like you would a brand new website, but this is an internal tool. And having people like your CEO or your management team really advocate for the use of this. So really your CEO should be one of the biggest users of any new system, and they should be setting the example of how to use it. But more importantly, it's creating a network of peers and champions, if you will, across the organisation who would do the rollout and promotion and potentially training. So we often have organisations come and ask me to go out and do direct training to all staff, but I usually push back and actually say, well, wouldn't this come better from people within your organisation and actually have someone who they can go back to on a regular basis? So one of your team members or one of the people who, you know, like using technology, have one of those people actually be skilled up and across the technology so that they can communicate that and they can provide support on an ongoing basis. And that could be in the casual learning opportunities as well as regular staff meetings. So there's not one answer to how you improve adoption. It's doing a combination of all of those. And really the key point is giving them a reason to go in to the system. If they've got no reason to do it, then really you don't necessarily need it. So it's giving them a reason or at least some motivation to go into these systems. All right, now I'm now going to talk about, so that was a general introduction. I'm now going to talk about a few of the key applications, but before I do that I might actually just flick back and pause for a second for some questions. So we're about halfway through, so Ollie, are there any questions so far, keeping in mind that we will go into a bit more detail about SharePoint and some of the other things?
Yeah, we might ask a couple or go through a couple. So if you, at the moment, Matthew, I think, has the paid version of Office 365, can you and how do you switch to the free version for not-for-profits?
So if you're referring to a paid version as in a version that you bought from Officeworks, which is pretty much Office, you can continue to use that as essentially as Office. So you could install that version of Office on your PC, but use the free E1 licenses to host your emails and everything else. So essentially, all users would get an E1 account, a free E1 account, in the new not-for-profit offer, but those who wanted desktop versions, you could use your old ones that you've already bought. To be honest, it gets a little bit messy and it's not ideal if you've actually got two Office 365 accounts running at the same time, but it can work.
Yeah,
the alternative to that would be to buy the $56 from Connecting Up, or actually buy another $2.90 per user per month add-on through Office 365.
Thank you, Matt. Another question that was asked by Kevin before the webinar. He would like to know if you had any advice or if it could be done using SharePoint lists as a source for Word mail merge documents.
So SharePoint, yes, SharePoint is good at documents. So SharePoint document libraries is where you would store documents. SharePoint lists are traditionally around different type of information. So whether that be more a database information or an incident report, or that's typically what you'd use a SharePoint list for. What Kevin might be referring to is some of the advanced mail merge functionality actually isn't great in Word Online. So in that case, I would actually have a Word document, Word 2016, with all the mail merge functionality, but you can just store that in Office 365 in a SharePoint library. So yes, you can definitely do that.
All right, we might keep going, Matt, and we'll answer the other questions at the end of the webinar.
Sure. Okay, I'll keep moving. So essentially now I'll dig into a little bit more detail about some of the key applications. Again, we don't have time today to cover off everything that is part of Office 365. We do have a couple of other webinars as well for some of those other things. But so let's get into SharePoint. Hopefully this might sort of answer some more of Kevin and other people's questions. So again, SharePoint is a very flexible tool. It traditionally was a server-based product, so many of you may have used SharePoint 2007 or 2010, but now you get SharePoint Online for free. And you can use that in a range of different ways. So some organizations use it for document management. Some organizations use it more as a organization intranet. Some organizations use it for forms and lists and databases. Many organizations use it for project management. And as you'll also see in those images on the screen there, it is pretty customizable in terms of look and feel and structure. So as the one on the bottom, it's very image-based and it's very button-based, so you can actually sort of click on different content. The one in the middle there, it's pretty plain, but it's for project management, whereas the top one's for an HR department portal. So again, very, very customizable. The tools within out-of-the-box SharePoint are pretty good. So most organizations can get away with just out-of-the-box SharePoint. Look, there is a lot you can do from a third-party application or design, but it's not normally a path we recommend. It can be a bit of a slippery slope. So we do recommend that you at least start off considering what you can do with out-of-the-box SharePoint, which is getting better and better. So one thing that does confuse people when you're talking about SharePoint document management is how what's the difference between SharePoint and OneDrive, and how does the local copy work. So essentially how we recommend you use SharePoint and OneDrive is every user gets a OneDrive account, and OneDrive is basically just documents. So you can store a terabyte of documents per user in your OneDrive. Now that OneDrive is associated with the user. So if Matt Walton leaves Info Exchange, then my OneDrive is gone, assuming you delete that. So we typically recommend that anything that you really want to share with a lot of other people or across your organization, that you don't actually store in OneDrive. You actually store that in SharePoint, which is more designed as a team sharing collaboration site. So you also get a terabyte of storage in SharePoint, a SharePoint site, plus 500 meg per user. So if you've got 100 users, it's a terabyte plus 100 times 500 meg. So what we recommend, things like policies, procedures, could be working, shared documents, project sites, whatever it may be, lists, that would live in a SharePoint document library. Now, both OneDrive and SharePoint are accessible via a web browser. So you go infoexchange.sharepoint.com and you log in and click SharePoint and get your documents. You can also sync. There's a synchronization tool called OneDrive Desktop Client, which is confusing, but that's what it's called. And you can actually click the sync button, and what it does, it creates basically a linked copy of every document that you sync down to your local computer. So personally, on my laptop, I have my OneDrive synced so that when I go on a plane, I can edit those documents on a plane, and then when I land and plug back into the internet, it synchronizes back up without me having to do much. So you do that for OneDrive, and you can also do that for SharePoint libraries. So you can also synchronize SharePoint libraries. So there is a pretty new OneDrive sync tool for OneDrive for Business, and they've also just released a similar one for SharePoint that's still in preview. So the syncing is getting better. I would just put a warning out that's saying if you are syncing, you do need to manage it and be careful, because there are some limitations around if they've got long file names, or if you've got over 5,000 documents in a particular library, or over 20,000 documents overall. There are some issues with syncing for those sort of scenarios. But in general, we have lots of clients who use that. So that's in regards to document management for SharePoint. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that SharePoint is very good at creating list forms and workflows. So instead of having multitudes of Excel spreadsheets or access databases that you need to sit on a server, or third-party applications, you can do some basic things in SharePoint and store it in a list. So as I touched on before, I've done incident reporting, IT requests, maintenance requests, new staff starter forms, all of those things. Now, what that is you basically input information into a form, and then when you click submit, it then goes into a list, which is a bit like a database. Now, if you set it up, you can also have workflows, so that when you submit an IT request, an email notification or a task goes to your IT department to complete that task, and then they come back into the list and edit that. So look, it's reasonably basic, and some of the tools associated with this are still a work in progress. So the new Flow tool is going to be really good, but still in a work in progress. Power Apps is going to be really good for this, but again, still a work in progress. So look, I would explore how that can work for you. Now, it won't necessarily replace an IT logging system if you're a really complex organisation, or it's not an OHS system, but it's a good, easy way to collect data from particularly internally. So I would explore, how SharePoint can help you with that, particularly if you're using it for other things and your staff are in there already. Storing data in lists is actually better than storing Excel sheets and things in different formats. The other thing that, if you've been using SharePoint for a while or you're considering SharePoint, there's another level of searching and finding called metadata. Now, I'm not sure this is going to be right for all of you. It's a bit too advanced, and users do need to change the way they work, so adoption can be difficult. But essentially what it is, it's having a piece of information, that may be a document, and categorizing it by multiple areas. So instead of just having, you've got an IT user guide for Windows, which is one of the examples on the screen there, in a folder called IT, you're actually categorizing it in a few different ways. So you're categorizing it by your department, but you're also categorizing it by your document type, and you can put as many of those on as you want. So what it's doing, it's allowing you to search and filter so that here you can actually say, okay, show me all the policies, show me all the things to do with IT, show me all the things, so you can sort and filter and cross-reference. So it's just that additional layer of sophistication, particularly for those organisations who have had issues with that single source of truth. So I've had issues where we've had sort of policies, for example, a child protection policy, and people want to store the child protection policy in the risk management folder, whereas other people want to store it in a policy folder, whereas other people want to store it in the children's services folder. So that really creates an issue where you're storing the same policy 3 times. When you need to update that policy, it can get a bit of a mess, and you're losing that single source of truth. Whereas if you can categorize by sort of metadata, you can store it in the one spot, but tag it to say it's a policy, tag it to say it's to do with risk management, tag it to say it's to do with children's services, and everyone can access it in the one spot. So again, caveat to say, a lot of people love folders, so I would tread carefully before you totally get rid of all folders. But in some scenarios, particularly with central policies and procedures libraries, that could be a better way to sort and search and find your documents than just folders. The other thing that Microsoft's done a lot of work on that's getting to be really good actually is called Delve. So you can access Delve from your menu. So in the top left corner there's the 9 buttons. It's one of the options on there. And Delve is starting to show a lot of rich information about each individual. So some people are actually using this to replace an org chart or a staff contact list, where you can actually just go into Delve, search for your colleagues, you can see their details if they put their interests and projects that they're working on and those sort of things in their profile. You can access that. But you can also access all their recent documents and things that you have permission to see, but it allows you to search a lot easier. So I have some colleagues who I often don't know where they store things, but I know that my colleague Marcus, I know that he was working on this document recently and talking about it, so I'm just going to go to his Delve and see his most recent documents, and I should be able to find it there. So it's just a new way to search and find and not have to rely on searching through folder after folder in a document library. to access information. And there's really some nice tools around Delve Analytics. And the best bit about Delve is I have not put any information in here. This just is created by me using the system. So I use Office 365 and Delve just presents all of how I work and what documents without me having to input anything. So that's one to keep an eye on and have a little play with. Yeah. All right, so if you get implementing SharePoint, I would always consider whether you need local storage as well. So don't automatically assume that you can totally get rid of all local storage. I know a lot of people come to us and say, I want to get rid of a server, and sometimes we can do that. But if you've got particularly if you've got a bad internet connection and really large files, probably putting them up online and then syncing them probably isn't the best idea. So even just some cheap storage like a NAS, or keeping some of your large files and videos locally could work. The other thing to consider is, are staff willing to change the way they work? So many staff just love accessing lots of folders. So if they want lots of folders and you're trying to implement a new solution that doesn't include lots of folders, you need to work with them to make sure they can change the way they work and not necessarily just replicate bad habits up on SharePoint. We've seen some quite bad implementations where people just bring across bad naming habits, bad folder habits, bad document management strategies and dump them on from a file server to SharePoint, and they continue to have issues. So often change management is important. Look at simple lists and forms, and maybe for small organisations or small users, Office 365 Groups is like a mini SharePoint site. So sometimes that's more suitable, and Yammer's pretty good as well. If you just interested in discussion and collaboration and document management is probably not your focus, then maybe look at Yammer. So let's move on to Skype for Business, and we can have some more SharePoint or other questions at the end. But Skype for Business is another one that, again, it's free. It allows you to see what your colleagues are doing, video conference, instant message. I actually use the instant message function on my mobile phone more than I use text messages for my internal colleagues. Video conferencing, you know, is a great way to communicate. I have staff that work interstate and colleagues that are all across the country at Info Exchange, as well as Auckland and Christchurch, and I video them all the time, and you know, it really helps build the team. So if you are looking at Skype for Business, again, if you do use the internet for video conferencing, so if you're looking at 6 people in your office, all using 6 computers, all using video, and you're on a poor ADSL connection, then expect that the quality is not going to be great. So I would, again, review your internet connection as part of your implementation of 365. So look, the phone integration, it's coming in terms of the cloud PABX. So it's getting there, but it is one to keep an eye out. So look, Skype for Business 2013 or 2016 nowadays is actually just part of Office Pro Plus. So it's one of the reasons we recommend Pro Plus instead of Standard. And it just means that most staff already actually have Skype for Business on their PCs. If you're on a video conference, we recommend that you actually use headsets and a cabled PC. So people often try and do it over poor Wi-Fi and their speaker on their laptop, and then they complain that the quality is no good. So it's more about what other equipment, $20 headset, could make this experience better. External sharing, you can, so I actually do sharing with a lot of my clients, instant messaging with people across other Office 365 tenants. So you can open up that sharing if you want to. As I said, Cloud PABX, and PSTN conferencing is now available. It's still in preview, but I'm using it at the moment, and it seems to work fine. But again, test it first before you roll it out. But it is an additional license. So it's an E5 license, which costs about $13 per user per month. So it is a cost, but again, many people are buying third-party conferencing tools for up to $50 a month. So $13 a month on top of your E1 can actually be pretty cost efficient. And again, you don't have to have that for everyone. So in my team, I've got it, and maybe one or two others have it, but most of our team actually don't use dial-in calls, so they don't need that E5 license. So that's okay to do it that way as well. All right, Yammer. So moving on to Yammer from Skype for Business. So again, it's a good collaboration tool. We have lots of clients that are using this in a range of different ways, but essentially it's a Facebook for Business style tool that allows your staff to collaborate and have some discussions and share news. So again, some people use this instead of an intranet. Many of our clients use it as well. So the intranet's more a formal top-down approach, whereas Yammer's more something where the staff actually drive the content. So if you're looking at rolling out Yammer, these are the key things that I would consider. So really it's working out what is the key purpose and what's the content plan. So who's going to post content and what type of content are we going to have here. Have an acceptable use policy to say, look, maybe don't post pictures of your Saturday nights on here, and have them really give some governance around what should be on there and what shouldn't. And confirm the roles and responsibilities of the team. Like any system, it's good to have some rules around how you use things. And then you create the groups, and then you send out communication to guests and proactively drive the adoption. So look, the Yammer rollout is actually a pretty simple process compared to SharePoint, which is a bit more complex in setting up. So Yammer's a bit more of a flexible, open tool that will grow organically, whereas SharePoint's a bit more of a structured site architecture that you need to set up. All right, so moving on to mobility. So Microsoft are actually getting better now at mobile apps. So, pardon me. So you see there on my iPad, there's a lot of Microsoft apps there that I can access most of the things I use in Office 365. So basically every application in Office 365 now has an app for Android and iOS for Apples and Macs. So instead of just using it through your Apple Mail or those sort of inbuilt phone functions, you can actually use the Outlook app that has calendars and mail and tasks and a range of other things. So again, you can access the SharePoint app, there's a OneDrive app, there's Office Lens, there's some really good apps nowadays. All right, so the other thing I mentioned before is mobile device management. So really looking at protecting that data, as well as having an option for accessing files offline if you need to, and that flows into your business continuity. So again, you want to make sure that if you're using this online system, you're catering for the people that may be remotely or may work on planes. So you're actually, it could just be that you've got business continuity that they tether off their phones or access things in another way. All right, and as I mentioned, Power Apps for Forms is one of the next steps for you to use. All right, one of the last things to cover is authentication. So obviously the first option there is you create Office 365 accounts and they stand alone. So it means you also might have a local PC account or a local server account as well as your Office 365 account. Now, if you're a larger organisation and if you have a server, then you may actually want to look at synchronizing those. So many organisations there's a product called AAD Connect, and it's something that you can synchronize your local Active Directory with Office 365 and Azure Active Directory. So basically what that means, it's the same username and password between your local PC and server as well as your Office 365. So we're seeing a lot of organisations go down that model. Now, Federation and ADFS gets a bit more complicated and would only be for really, really large organisations with quite complex and enterprise level sort of server environments. So that's something to consider as to how many user accounts that your staff actually have and what type of authentication is suitable for them. All right, so here are my top tips. I'll make sure I save a few minutes for questions. So really, as I started off with, make sure that the applications that you use add value to your organisation and staff. So again, it's not about playing with new toys, it's about having some business value and organisation benefit to these new tools. And that could be saving a few dollars on servers, or it could be saving travel by using Skype for Business. So it's looking at those ways to improve how you work. Number two there is, don't just jump in and start using it. I would just think again about how you're using it and why you're using it before you start implementing. And in that case, maybe you need a partner, or maybe you need to do some of your research or some more of these webinars to really understand what the value is going to be for your organisation. And then sell that and explain that to the staff and engage some of them to help you roll that out as a local champion model. And then really looking at your infrastructure. So what copy of Office do you have? Are your internet connections good enough for video conferencing? Are you accessing via mobiles? Those sort of things. Do you need mobile device management? Those sort of infrastructure related things are worth looking at first before you just go and do the implementation. And really it's about resourcing the platform and make sure that you can have support. So one of the things we're actually seeing is Office 365 being newish, I suppose, over the last few years. Some of the local support providers actually aren't able to provide a good level of support. So it's looking at, if you're changing platforms, you may consider actually either training up someone internally or finding a provider that can support you, or working with your current provider to make sure that they're getting upskilled as well. So there's some of the key tips for using Office 365 and definitely considerations before you implement. So there are some resources that in partnership with Connecting Up, Info Exchange are providing. So if you're still not sure whether you should implement or not and you want a bit more detail about how to implement or what it could cost, what the process is to migrate, then a readiness assessment is a good process to go through, where it's actually one of our consultants or possibly myself that can work with you through a process to collect information about your organisation and give you a report and recommendations and have some discussion about whether it's suitable, and if so, how to go about it. So that's available. You can buy that on the Connecting Up site for $100. But if you're ready to migrate, but you think you can do it yourself in terms of you've got some technical expertise, but you just want a bit of mentoring or support, our engineers and myself actually provide do-it-yourself workshops. So it's a series of webinars that will support you through the migration process. So there's several different ones if you're just looking at email, or you're looking at SharePoint or Advanced. So again, have a look at the connecting up sites and register for those. So they're $300 for 3 one-hour webinars plus some additional support. And obviously, look, this isn't a sales pitch, but we can obviously help with implementation as well, and there are lots of other partners out there that can do that. So look, usually we do say that often there is some value in getting some support from someone who's been through it before. That can reduce your risk and actually make it more efficient to do the implementation. So particularly with the more complex ones. And we often do, we'll do an annual roadshow as well where we go out and demonstrate the new functions or features of Office 365. So I did promise that I'd save some time for questions, so I think I've done that with 4 minutes to go. So I'm happy to hang around for as long as you need, or as I said, my email address and phone number are on the bottom of the slide there. So happy for people to contact me directly, or my colleagues can as well. All right, over to you, Ollie. Any questions?
Thank you, Matt. We'll start with a couple of questions about the limitations of SharePoint. Jeff said that he understands SharePoint has file size limits, even though there is more than 1 terabyte available. How big a file can go on SharePoint?
Yeah, so there's a whole list, and I can actually send a link through this as to all the limits. Usually the file limits, I think it's 250 meg at the moment, the 250 gig off the top of the head. But what we're seeing as the biggest issue, more as opposed to the size of the files, but things like the name length of the files, and also how many files in the library. So to be honest, if you're storing those massive files up on, I'd look at what you're doing. So to be honest, if you're storing videos, there is an Office 365 video portal that you could use for that. Or if you're storing other types of files, maybe you need a local NAS. So again, the limitations are reasonably generous for those files, and you can store up to 5,000 in each library and sync that, or 20,000 per user. But most of the issues come when you actually try and synchronize that with your local. So if you are storing large files, I'd probably recommend to not try and sync those back to your local OneDrive, and that you actually just use the web portal.
And you mentioned the 20,000 documents limit. Is that only for synchronization or for SharePoint itself?
No, that's for any one user to synchronize. So you can have a lot more than 20,000 across your SharePoint site, but the 20,000 is for the OneDrive synchronization client, where it can start having issues after 20,000 for each user. So really what we often recommend is actually that people start using actually just the web browsers. So it's really a change in habit that if you can get away with actually using SharePoint via the web browser, it's actually a much more effective tool than trying to pretend it's a file server and do a lot of syncing.
Okay, question from David. Does Office 365 provide a records management type tool?
Look, it depends what you mean by records management, but yes, SharePoint lists can perform that function depending on what you need. So it's obviously document management, but if you're just tracking actual individual items in a SharePoint list, then SharePoint can act as essentially a bit of a custom database that you can apply any record you want as an item in a SharePoint list, and then tag it by particular columns that you want to track against that item. So it could be that you might have a policy renewal date or an expiry date or a certain fields that you want associated with that record. So the term records management is quite broad, so we'd need to maybe sort of narrow that or follow that up offline as to what records you're referring to. But yeah, in general, you can customize a SharePoint list to collect any sort of information that you want.
All right, this is a question that comes up quite often. So could you please go through the steps you have to go through to go from the E3 Office 365 to E1?
Yeah, so if basically it's per user, you just go into the admin portal and change the license. So if you're actually changing between E1 and E3, it's really easy, just an admin setting where essentially you can just go to any user and assign certain licenses. So today I may have an E1 license, and tomorrow you say, okay, I want to give that user an E5 license because they want Skype for Business as well as Office. So you give me an E5. I change roles, you may want to take that off me, and that's fine. So that's really just managing each user in the admin portal. So I would call that a 1-minute task, essentially, to change from an E1 to an E3. There are some plans that are difficult to change between, and that's if you're trying to move from an education plan over to an enterprise plan, or if you're on one of those, there's like a small business style plan. If you want to move to a small business plan to an E1 plan, that's actually a lot more complicated, and it's basically a migration process. But E1 to any other E plan is really easy.
All right, thank you, Matt. We have no more questions, so would you like to add anything before we close this webinar?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more, look, I hope I didn't scare you off by making you think about too many things. Look, it is a great tool. It's very suitable for all sorts of organisations. I think we're just wanting to make sure that people don't, head down the wrong path. So I think it is important to have some planning and have some governance around what you're doing with Office 365, but yeah, definitely worth exploring. And yeah, you can't beat free. So I think it's definitely a tool that we're seeing a lot of organisations in the not-for-profit sector of all sizes get some really good value.
Well, thank you, Matt, for presenting and for a lot of information. It is definitely always a very full-on webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you learned a lot from it. If you have any questions that comes to your mind later on, please feel free to send them through to me at events@connectingup.org, and I'll forward them to Matt, or you can email Matt directly using the email address that is on your screen. Just to remind you, the recording will be uploaded shortly and the link will be sent to you in the next couple of days. And that is the end of this session. Thank you again for joining and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.